The morning sun cast long shadows across Arlington National Cemetery when Ranger Tom first saw them. He had walked these paths for 15 years, knew every stone and every tree, but he had never seen anything like this. They looked like people made of water and light. Their shapes shifted and changed, sometimes almost solid, sometimes barely there at all. 3 of them knelt at the tomb of the unknown soldier, completely still. Tom rubbed his eyes, thinking maybe he needed more coffee, but they were still there when he looked again. He reached for his radio with shaking hands. "Central, this is, we have. I don't know what we have. You need to send someone to the tomb, now." Within an hour, the cemetery was full of people who weren't rangers. Men and women in dark suits with earpieces. Scientists with equipment Tom didn't recognize. The strange visitors hadn't moved. They just knelt there, silent and shimmering in the morning light. Dr. Sarah arrived just before noon. She was a physicist, though Tom heard someone say she worked with things that sounded like science fiction. Research, they called it. She approached the being slowly, carefully, like someone approaching a wild animal. "Can you understand me?" she asked. The beings didn't speak. Instead, Tom felt something wash over him like a wave. It wasn't sound or touch, but somehow he understood it. Sadness. Deep, ancient sadness that made his chest tight and his eyes sting with tears he didn't expect. Doctor gasped and pressed her hand to her heart. "They're communicating through emotion," she said to the other scientists. "Get the resonance equipment. We need to translate this properly." It took 3 days to build the translation device. During that time, more of the beings appeared at memorials around the world. The Vietnam Wall, the 9/11 Memorial in New York, Hiroshima, Auschwitz, always the same thing. They arrived, they knelt, they radiated waves of grief that left everyone nearby in tears. The media called them ghosts, angels, demons. Religious leaders debated what they meant. World governments demanded answers. But the beings just waited, patient and silent. When Doctor finally activated the translation device, the first words they received weren't words at all. They were images, feelings, memories that flooded into the minds of everyone in the room. Tom saw Earth from above, but different. He saw it from outside normal space, from somewhere else entirely. He saw human history playing out like a movie, but he saw it through eyes that weren't human. He saw wars and death and suffering, but he also saw something else. He saw the memorials. He saw humans building monuments to remember their dead. He saw people crying at graves, leaving flowers, speaking names that should have been forgotten. And he felt what the beings felt when they watched: wonder, amazement, something close to reverence. "We are the translation device finally spoke in a flat, mechanical voice that somehow still carried emotion. "We have watched your species for thousands of your years. We have watched many species across many dimensions. You are unique." Doctor's hands trembled as she typed on her tablet. "How are we unique?" Another wave of emotion. This time it was harder to describe. Respect mixed with sorrow, mixed with something that might have been hope. "You remember your dead," they said. "Not just in your minds. You build temples to remember them. You teach your children their names. You refuse to let them disappear. We have seen hundreds of intelligent species. None of them do this. When their people die, they forget. They move forward. They don't look back. But humans cannot forget. Humans will not forget." Tom felt his throat tighten. He thought about the names carved on the stones around them. Thousands and thousands of names. People who died in wars he barely remembered from history class. But someone had carved every single name. Someone had made sure they would never be forgotten. "Why does that matter to you?" Doctor asked softly. They were quiet for a long moment. When they responded, the emotion that came with their words was overwhelming. Loss. Terrible, infinite loss that made Tom's knees weak. "We are dying," they said. "Our species has existed for millions of years, but we are fading. In a few hundred of your years, we will be gone. When we are gone, no one will remember us. No one will build monuments. No one will speak our names. We will vanish as if we never existed. This is true for most species. They live, they die, they are forgotten. The universe is full of ghosts that no one remembers. But you found us, Doctor said. Yes, we found humans. We found the species that refuses to forget. We found the ones who build monuments to their sorrow, who turn their grief into stone and metal so it will last forever. We have come to ask a question. What question? May we join you? May we visit your memorials and honor your dead? May we learn how to remember the way you do? Before we fade, we want to understand what it means to be mourned, what it means to matter enough that someone will remember. Tom found himself crying without knowing exactly why. Around him, he saw scientists and soldiers and government officials all with tears on their faces. They weren't threatening. They weren't here to conquer or study or take. They were here because they were dying, and they wanted to understand what humans had that they didn't. The question went to the United Nations. For 2 weeks, the world argued. Some countries said this should be welcomed. Others said it was a trick, that nothing could really be this innocent. Some religious leaders said they were angels sent by God. Others said they were demons testing humanity's faith. Tom spent those 2 weeks at Arlington, watching the kneel at the tomb. They never moved except to let rangers and visitors pass. They never demanded anything. They just waited. On the 15th day, Doctor came back to the cemetery. She walked straight to with a tablet in her hands. Tom followed her, curious and nervous. The vote passed, she told them. You can visit our memorials, all of them, anywhere in the world. Will help you understand what they mean. The wave of emotion that came from the nearly knocked Tom off his feet. Joy, pure, overwhelming joy mixed with gratitude so deep it hurt. Thank you, they said through the device. Thank you for letting us remember with you. That night Tom stayed late at the cemetery. More appeared as darkness fell. They came in groups of 2 and 3, materializing near different graves. They moved slowly between the white headstones, stopping at each one. Tom watched them and realized they were reading the names, every single name. He approached one of them carefully. Can you understand what the names mean? Can you tell who these people were? They turned to him. Through the translation device on his belt, he heard them speak. We cannot read your language easily, but we understand. Each name is a person. Each person had a life. People loved them. People missed them. You carved their names so they would never be forgotten. That is enough. That is everything. Tom looked at the nearest headstone. James R. It read, 1945-1967. He didn't know who James was. Didn't know if he had a family or what he liked to do or what his dreams were. But someone had carved his name here. Someone had made sure that even decades after his death, people would see his name and know he existed. We do this for everyone, Tom said quietly. Rich or poor, famous or unknown. If you died serving, we remember you. We teach our children to remember. We make sure that as long as humans exist, you won't be forgotten. That is why we came, they said. That is why you are special. In all the dimensions we have seen, across all the species we have watched, only humans do this. Only humans turn grief into something permanent. Only humans refuse to let death mean disappearance. Tom stood with thee in the darkness, surrounded by thousands of names carved in stone. For the first time in his 15 years as a ranger, he truly understood what this place meant. It wasn't just a cemetery. It was humanity's promise. A promise that you mattered, that your life meant something, that you would never, ever be forgotten. And now, beings from another dimension had crossed impossible distances just to learn how humans kept that promise. As more appeared in the cemetery, shimmering like starlight between the graves, Tom felt something shift in his understanding of the universe. Humans weren't the strongest species or the most advanced, but they were the ones who remembered. They were the ones who honored their dead. They were the ones who built monuments to sorrow and turned them into places of meaning. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. 6 months passed, and the world changed in ways no one expected. They weren't alone anymore. Dr. Sarah stood at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, watching 3 different species of beings move along the black granite wall. Each one touched the names carved into the stone with appendages that ranged from tentacles to pure energy to something that looked like crystal. "This is getting complicated," said Williams, standing beside her. He was a Marine veteran who had volunteered to become a guide for the visitors. At first, Sarah thought he hated the job. He had barely spoken during his training, his jaw tight with what looked like anger. But today he was calmer. Today he was watching a being made of what looked like living crystal press its body against the wall. The creature was called and it had been standing there for 3 hours. "What's it doing?" Sarah asked. "Reading," said. "All of them. Every name. It told me it experiences time differently than we do. When it touches the wall, it sees the reflections of everyone who's visited, every face of every person who came here to mourn. It says the wall shows it futures that never happened, the lives these soldiers should have lived." Sarah watched the shimmer and pulse with colors she didn't have names for. That must be overwhelming. "It says it hurts," said quietly. "It says seeing all those stolen futures hurts worse than anything it's ever felt." I asked why it keeps doing it. You know what it said? "What?" "It said pain is the price of remembering properly. If it doesn't hurt, you're not doing it right." Sarah thought about that as she watched more beings arrive. They came next, floating spheres of light that absorbed the emotional energy left behind by visitors. They claimed they were learning what it meant to witness evil without becoming numb to it. Then the Eth appeared, creatures that looked like they were carved from living stone. They didn't just visit memorials. They left pieces of themselves behind. Sarah had watched one break off part of its own arm and plant it at Gettysburg. When she asked why, it said the practice caused them pain but was necessary. They were leaving parts of their souls to stand guard over the fallen. Every day brought new species. Every day the memorials became more crowded with beings from dimensions humans couldn't visit or even fully understand. Some came to mourn. Some came to learn. Some came for reasons they couldn't explain in any language humans could translate. Sarah moved through the crowds with her tablet, documenting everything. The UN had created an entire department to handle visitors. She was the director, though most days she felt more like a student. Every species taught her something new about grief and memory and the weight of remembering. At the Holocaust Museum she met a young woman whose grandmother had survived Hiroshima, worked at the Peace Memorial and had formed an unexpected friendship with her. The being followed everywhere, pulsing with soft light. "It absorbed my grandmother's memories," explained when Sarah asked about their connection. "Before she died, we brought her to meet them. She wanted her memories to be preserved. Everything she saw, everything she survived, they took them. Now those memories exist across dimensions. Even if Earth disappears, even if humanity ends, someone will remember what happened to her. She'll never be forgotten." Sarah watched the pulse brighter and she felt the emotion radiating from it. Love, protection, the fierce determination to keep a promise. "How do you feel about that?" Sarah asked. "I thought I'd be angry," said. "Like it was stealing something, but it's not stealing, it's witnessing. My grandmother wanted someone to witness what happened to her, to really see it and understand it and carry it forward. That does that. It doesn't just remember her story, it feels it. It lives it across dimensions. She matters to it in a way that's bigger than anything I can explain." Sarah added story to her notes, but her hand shook as she wrote. The implications were staggering. Human grief and human memory were becoming immortal, carried by beings that existed outside normal time and space. But not everything was beautiful. The trouble started at a new species arrived, calling themselves the Or. They looked almost human, but their eyes were empty and cold. They didn't kneel at the memorial. They didn't mourn. They examined everything with the detachment of scientists studying bacteria. Sarah arrived within hours of the first reports. She found already there standing between the Or and a group of survivors who had come to visit. His face was hard, his body tense like he was ready for a fight. "They're not like the others," he said when Sarah approached. "Something's wrong." Sarah activated her translation device and addressed the Or. "Why are you here?" The response came cold and clinical. "We are studying human. We wish to understand how you process collective trauma, how you remember atrocity without becoming paralyzed by it, how you honor the dead while still functioning as a society." "That's what everyone's studying," Sarah said carefully. "What makes you different?" "We need this knowledge for practical application. Our dimension faces war, a war that will determine the survival of multiple species. We believe human methods of remembrance can be weaponized. If we can make our enemies remember their losses vividly enough, it will break them. They will be too paralyzed by grief to fight." Sarah felt ice in her stomach. Around her, other visitors had stopped to listen. Some were crying. Others looked angry. An elderly woman who wore a survivor's badge on her jacket stepped forward, her face pale. "You want to use our grief as a weapon?" she asked, her voice shaking. "We want to understand the mechanism," the Or said. "You have turned memory into something powerful enough to bring beings from other dimensions. That power can be replicated. That power can win wars." Moved before Sarah could stop him, he walked straight up to the Or, close enough that they were almost touching. His voice was quiet, but everyone could hear it. "You don't understand anything," he said. "You think we build these places to hurt ourselves. You think we carve names and build monuments because we want to suffer. We think you are unique in your ability to process trauma and continue functioning," the Or replied. "We don't build these to break ourselves," said. "We build them to remind ourselves what we're capable of, the good and the bad. We look at these names and we remember that every single one was a person, someone's son or daughter, someone's friend. We remember that war isn't glorious or simple. We remember that every decision has weight. Every death matters. That's not a weapon. That's a warning. That's humanity telling itself to do better." The Or didn't respond immediately. Sarah watched their expressions, trying to read them, but she couldn't tell if words had any effect. "You want to weaponize remembrance," continued. "Then you've already lost, because if you have to break people with their grief to win, you're not building anything worth having. You're just creating more names for more walls, more people who'll need to be remembered. Is that what you want? To be remembered as the ones who turned mourning into a tool?" The silence stretched out. Sarah held her breath. Finally, the Or stepped back. "We will consider your words," they said, and then they vanished, blinking out of reality as quickly as they'd appeared. Stood there breathing hard, his hands clenched into fists. The elderly survivor approached him and took his hand. "Thank you," she said softly. That night, Sarah called an emergency UN meeting. She explained what had happened and played the recording of confrontation. The room erupted in debate. Some delegates wanted to close the memorials to all visitors immediately. Others argued that was impossible, that humans couldn't enforce dimensional boundaries. A few suggested that what happened with the Or proved the visitors were dangerous. "They're not all dangerous," Sarah said, speaking over the noise. "Most of them came here to learn about compassion, about remembrance, about honoring the dead. Yes, some will misunderstand. Some will try to use what they learn in ways we don't like. But that doesn't mean we should shut the door." "What if they come back?" someone asked. "What if the Or return and try to force us to teach them?" "Then we do what did," Sarah said. "We tell them the truth. We show them what these memorials really mean. We trust that the truth is stronger than any lie or any weapon." The vote was close, but it passed. The memorials would stay open. Earth would continue to welcome mourners from across dimensions, even knowing some might not come for the right reasons. Sarah returned to the Vietnam Wall that night, was still there, sitting on the ground with his back against the black granite. There was with him, its crystalline body dim in the darkness. "You did good today," Sarah said, sitting down beside him. I just told them the truth, said. These places aren't about pain. They're about promise. We promise to remember. We promise to do better. We promise that the people who died mattered enough that we'll carry them forward forever. They told me something earlier, Sarah said. It said that in all its travels across dimensions, it's never seen a species that keeps its promises the way humans do. Other species make promises and break them when it's convenient, but humans carve their promises into stone. They teach their children to remember those promises. They build entire monuments to remind themselves not to forget. Reached up and touched the wall behind him. His fingers traced a name carved into the granite. That's my uncle, he said quietly. James William. He died 3 years before I was born. I never met him, but I grew up hearing stories. My dad brought me here when I was 7 and showed me his name. Told me that Uncle Jimmy liked baseball and bad jokes and wanted to be a teacher. Told me that he died scared and far from home, but he died trying to protect his friends. You were named after him, Sarah said. Yeah, Dad said it was so I'd remember to be brave like Jimmy, to stand up for what's right, to protect people who need it. That's what this wall is. It's not just names, it's promises. Every single name is someone promising that this person mattered, that they won't be forgotten, that their life meant something. Sarah looked at the thousands of names surrounding them. In the darkness, she could see the faint shimmer of and other beings moving along the wall, touching names, reading stories carved in granite. They're all keeping the promise with us now, she said. Every being that comes here, every species that learns about human memorials, they're helping us remember. We're not alone anymore. Smiled, and it was the first real smile Sarah had seen from him. No, he said, I guess we're not. 10 years later, Sarah stood at a memorial that existed in 3 dimensions at once. She was older now, her hair shot through with gray, but her eyes were still sharp. The device on her wrist hummed softly, keeping her anchored to Earth while allowing her to perceive the overlapping realities around her. It was experimental technology, developed from what they had taught them. Only a few hundred humans had the procedure to receive it. The memorial she stood at was in Arlington, but it was also somewhere else. Somewhere that existed between dimensions, where the barriers between realities grew thin. Here, visitors from a dozen different dimensions could gather without needing translation devices or special equipment. Here, the dead were remembered across all possible versions of existence. Tom was still a ranger at Arlington, though he was old now too. He walked the paths with a cane, but he refused to retire. He greeted visitors in 3 languages and 5 different forms of emotional resonance. Some days, Sarah thought he understood the mourners better than she did. They're here, Tom said, approaching her. All of them, this is it. Sarah's heart clenched. She had known this day was coming. They had told her years ago that they were dying, but knowing and experiencing were different things. She followed Tom to the tomb of the unknown soldier, where a crowd had gathered. Not just humans, but beings from dimensions that didn't have names in any human language. They were there, their crystalline bodies pulsing with colors that meant sorrow in their language. They floated overhead, dimmer than Sarah had ever seen them. The Eth stood like statues, pieces of their bodies already crumbling into dust that blew away on a wind that wasn't physical. And at the center of everything, they waited. There were only 50 of them left. 10 years ago, there had been thousands. They shimmered and faded, barely holding their forms together. Thank you for coming, one of them said through the translation field. Its voice was weak, like an echo of an echo. We wanted to be here at the place where this all began when the end comes. Sarah stepped forward. Her throat was tight, her eyes burning. We're honored to be with you. We have a gift, they said, a choice to offer. We are the last of our kind, but our purpose does not have to die with us. For millions of years, we have traveled between dimensions, bearing witness to the fall of civilizations. We have remembered species that no longer exist. We have carried the stories of worlds that turned to dust long before your son was born. This has been our purpose, our reason for existing. but we are fading, and soon there will be no one to remember the forgotten." "What are you saying?" Sarah asked, though part of her already knew. "We are offering to transfer our consciousness to your species, our memories, our abilities, our purpose. Humanity would become what we have been. You would travel between dimensions not as explorers or conquerors, but as mourners, as witnesses, as keepers of universal memory." The crowd erupted in noise, humans shouting questions, other species pulsing with emotion. Sarah raised her hand for silence. "What would that mean?" she asked. "What would it cost?" "It would change you," they said. "Those who accept the transfer would carry the weight of dimensional tragedy. You would remember civilizations you never knew. You would mourn for species that died before Earth existed. You would see the fall of empires and the extinction of entire forms of life. You would carry all of that forever, across every dimension you visit." "That sounds like torture," someone in the crowd said. "It is a burden," they agreed. "But it is also sacred. To be remembered is the last gift we can give to the dead. To ensure that someone somewhere stands witness to every tragedy and every triumph, that nothing is ever truly forgotten, that every life, no matter how small or how long ago, matters to someone." Sarah looked around at the faces of humans and aliens alike. She saw fear there, but also understanding. These beings had come from across dimensions to learn about human. Now they were being offered the chance to become part of something bigger, something eternal. "I need to speak with my people," Sarah said. "This is too big a decision to make right now." "We have time," they said. "A few more days, then we fade and our purpose dies with us." The United Nations called an emergency session. Every nation sent representatives. The visitors were invited too, because this decision would affect everyone. Sarah stood before them all and explained what they had offered. The debate lasted for 3 days. Some people said it was humanity's destiny to accept. Others said it was a trap, that taking on the memories of dying species would break the human mind. Religious leaders argued about the spiritual implications. Scientists worried about the practical ones. Williams was the one who cut through all the noise. He stood up in the middle of the third day, when the arguing had become circular and angry. "I'm volunteering," he said simply. The room went silent. "I'm 52 years old," continued. "I've spent the last 10 years teaching visitors about human memorials. I've seen what we've built here. Not just the memorials themselves, but the relationships, the understanding. We've shown the universe that grief matters, that remembering matters. Now we have a chance to take that further, to make sure that no one, anywhere, in any dimension is ever truly forgotten. How can I say no to that?" "You'd be taking on an impossible burden," someone said. "Yeah," said, "but humans have been taking on impossible burdens for thousands of years. We've been carrying our dead with us, building monuments, teaching our children to remember. This is just the next step. Someone has to do it. Someone has to stand witness. Why not us? Why not the species that built temples to sorrow and turned grief into something holy?" Stood up next. "I'll volunteer too. My grandmother's memories are already out there, carried by the... I want to do the same for others. I want to make sure that what happened to her, what happened to all the victims of war and tragedy, is never forgotten." One by one, people stood. Scientists and veterans and teachers and students, young and old from every nation. Not everyone, but enough. By the end of the day, 5,000 humans had volunteered to undergo the transfer and become what Sarah was already calling the Memorial Corps. They wept when they heard the news. Sarah didn't know they could cry until she saw tears made of light falling from their fading forms. "You would do this?" they asked. "You would take our burden and carry it forward?" "We would," Sarah said, "because that's what humans do. We remember, we honor the dead, we stand witness. You taught us that we're not alone in that now. Let us teach the universe that no one has to be forgotten." The transfer happened over 7 days. Sarah was in the first group. She lay on a table in a laboratory that existed partially outside normal space, surrounded by equipment that humans and aliens had built together. They gathered around her, their forms barely visible now. "This will hurt," they warned her. "You will experience memories that are not yours. You will feel deaths you did not die. You will mourn for people whose names you cannot pronounce in any human language." "I understand," Sarah said. "Do it." The transfer felt like drowning in stars. Sarah's mind expanded beyond anything she thought possible. She saw civilizations rising and falling. She felt the death of species she had no words for. She watched worlds burn and go cold. She experienced grief in 1,000 different forms, from 1,000 different perspectives. She saw a species that had loved music more than anything, go extinct when their sun exploded 2 million years ago. She felt the last of them singing as the flames took them, their final notes a prayer that someone, somewhere, would remember their songs. She witnessed the beings made of living mathematics solve their final equation as their dimension collapsed. They had known they were dying and had spent their last years calculating the exact moment of their end. Their last thought was hope that their numbers meant something. She experienced the deaths of 100 billion individuals across 1,000 dimensions, each one a person, each one someone who had lived and loved and hoped and feared, each one now carried in her memory, perfect and eternal. When the transfer ended, Sarah opened her eyes and wept. She wept for species she had never heard of an hour ago. She wept for civilizations that had died before Earth was formed. She wept because now she understood what they had carried alone for millions of years. "I'm sorry," she said to them. "I'm so sorry you had to do this alone." "We are not alone anymore," they said. "And neither are the dead. Thank you for remembering them." Over the next week, 5,000 humans underwent the same transfer. Some of them broke. The weight was too much, and they had to be gently removed from the program, the memories carefully extracted before they caused permanent damage. But most of them endured. Most of them carried the weight and understood that it was worth it. Came out of his transfer and immediately asked for coordinates. "There's a dead world in Dimension 7 Alpha," he said. "A species called the Eth destroyed themselves in nuclear fire 3,000 years ago. No one remembers them. No one knows they existed. I need to go there. I need to build them a memorial." The Memorial Corps was formed officially on the 10th anniversary of first contact with the 5,000 humans, each one carrying the memories of dead civilizations, each one dedicated to ensuring that no tragedy was ever forgotten. They were given ships that could travel between dimensions, technology built by combining human engineering with knowledge from a dozen different species. Sarah stood at Arlington on the day the first ships launched. The last of them were barely visible now, just wisps of light that might have been her imagination. But she felt them there, watching with pride as humanity took up their burden. "We'll remember you too," she promised them. "When you're gone, we'll build you a memorial. We'll tell your story to everyone who asks. You won't be forgotten." "We know," they said, their voice so faint she almost couldn't hear it. "That is why we chose you. That is why humans are special. You keep your promises, even the impossible ones." The ships launched, disappearing into dimensions that had no names. Sarah watched them go and felt the weight of her new purpose settle onto her shoulders. It was heavy. It hurt. But it was also right. 20 years later, Sarah stood on a dead world in a dimension that existed 3 universes away from Earth. The species that had lived here had called themselves something that translated roughly to the Singers of Dawn. They had been peaceful, artistic, dedicated to creating beauty. Then a plague had come, something they had no immunity to, and within a generation they were gone. No one had been there to see them die. No one had witnessed their last days. No one had cared. Until now. Sarah placed a marker in the center of what had once been their greatest city. It was made of a material that would exist across dimensional boundaries, visible in any reality where someone bothered to look. On it, She had carved their name in every language she knew, human and alien alike. Beneath that, she had written a simple message. Here lived the singers of dawn. They existed, they mattered, they are remembered. As she finished, she felt presences around her. Other mourners, human and alien, arriving to stand witness. The came first, its crystalline body reflecting the light of the dead world's dying sun. Then absorbing the emotional echoes of the extinct civilization. The Eth planted pieces of themselves in the ruins, standing eternal guard over the fallen. And arrived last, his hair white now, his face lined with the weight of memories that weren't his own. He stood beside Sarah and looked at the memorial. "Another one saved from oblivion," he said quietly. "Another promise kept," Sarah agreed. They stood together in silence, two humans on a dead world in a dimension far from home, surrounded by beings from a dozen different realities. All of them mourners, all of them witnesses, all of them dedicated to the same impossible, beautiful purpose. Ensuring that no one, anywhere, in any dimension would ever be truly forgotten. That somewhere, across all of existence, someone would always be standing vigil. That every life, no matter how small or how long ago or how far away, mattered to someone. This was humanity's gift to the multiverse. Not technology or art or philosophy, but the simple, fierce insistence that the dead deserve to be remembered. That loss matters. That grief is not weakness but strength. That standing witness to tragedy is one of the most important things anyone can do. The memorial core grew over the decades. Thousands became tens of thousands. They traveled to dimensions that had never seen Earth, to worlds where humanity was unknown. They built memorials for species that had been forgotten for millions of years. They stood vigil over the graves of civilizations that had fallen before humanity learned to make fire. And everywhere they went, they carried the same message. You are not forgotten. You mattered. Someone remembers. Sarah was old now, so old that her original body had been replaced with a form that could survive the rigors of dimensional travel. But her mind was still human, still carried the core of who she had been when she first met thee at Arlington all those years ago. She stood at a memorial she had built on a world that existed in a dimension she couldn't fully perceive. The beings who had lived here had been dead for 10 million years. Their name was lost, their language forgotten, their civilization turned to less than dust. But Sarah remembered them. She had their memories in her mind, transferred from the who had witnessed their final days. She knew their hopes and dreams. She knew they had loved their children. She knew they had tried to survive. She knew they had failed. "I'm here," she said to the empty air, to the ghosts of a civilization that no longer existed. "I see you. I remember you. You are not forgotten." As she spoke, her words rippled across dimensions. Other mourners, scattered across countless realities, echoed her promise at countless other memorials. Human and alien voices, speaking in unison across the multiverse. You are not forgotten. You mattered. Someone remembers. This was what they had given humanity. This was what humans had taken and made their own. The eternal vigil. The promise that transcended dimensions. The insistence that every single life, no matter how small, deserved to be remembered. Sarah looked up at the alien sky and smiled. It was a heavy burden. It hurt. Some days the weight of so many dead pressed down on her so hard she could barely breathe. But it was worth it. Every memorial built, every name remembered, every promise kept. Because in the end, that was what made humans special. Not their strength or their technology or their intelligence. Their refusal to forget, their dedication to standing witness, their absolute certainty that everyone, everywhere, deserved to be mourned. And now, across all dimensions, in every corner of the multiverse, someone was always standing vigil. Someone was always remembering. Someone always would be.